the reason.
Welcome back. Rob Port sitting in for the chairman of the Common Sense Club, Scott Hennon. I've got a guest on next. You know, that New York 9 special election, Congressman Anthony, former Congressman Anthony Weiner's district. Obviously, Congressman Weiner, I shouldn't call him Congressman Weiner anymore. Anthony Weiner stepping down in disgrace after a sex scandal I'm sure you're all familiar with. Obviously, special election to fill that seat again. Republican won. This is a heavily Democratic district. Reports that I heard 3-1 voter registration advantage for Democrats over Republicans, yet somehow Republicans won. The headline for the Drudge Report after Republicans won that district was Revenge of the Jews. On with me now to do the calculus on what's going on with the Jewish vote is Dan Senior. He's author of The Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle. He's also a former advisor to the Coalition Provisional Authority. Mr. Senior, welcome to the program, first of all.
Good to be with you.
Happy to have you on. Let me ask you this question: Revenge of the Jews. What does that mean? I mean, so somebody reading that, I guess at home, maybe not real familiar with I guess the Jewish vote and things like that. I mean, what exactly does that mean?
Well, let me maybe spend a minute on how I interpreted the significance of the electoral outcome in New York 9. You understand the context of this district. As you said, it's a 3-1 Democrat registration district. Anthony Weiner won the race in 2010, just last year, with a comfortable margin by double digits. It's a district that before Anthony Weiner was held by Chuck Schumer, Senator Charles Schumer, for years. Very safe district, never had any real challenges there. Before that, the seat was held by Geraldine Ferraro. So this is a seat that's been in Democratic hands for decades. Now, one of the key demographics in the district is the Jewish community in Brooklyn and Queens. And most of that Jewish community overwhelmingly had voted like it was a reflection of the national Jewish community. It had been voting overwhelmingly for Democrats for as long as I can remember. And that changed dramatically in this election. And even though the Democrat running in the race against Bob Turner was pro-Israel and had actually been quite critical of President Obama's policies, that wasn't the point. What happened with the Jewish community in that district, among other things, wasn't the only factor, I would just simply say it was the largest factor, is that they were looking for an expression, a way of expressing their frustration with the direction President Obama has taken the U.S.-Israel relationship, this strong, durable alliance that has survived and flourished under administrations of both political parties, that is one that's about a strategic partnership, but it's also about shared values, a fellow democracy in a sea of totalitarian states, and America's commitment to standing by this democracy. And there's a growing concern among many in the Jewish community across the country. This is a very important point, Rob. Across the country, there's growing concern within the Jewish community, in the American Jewish community, that President Obama is rupturing this alliance. And what you had in the New York 9 special election Tuesday, was the first opportunity for a large Jewish community to actually go to the polls and express that. There hasn't been a real opportunity to do that recently. This was the first moment to do it, and I think it's a precursor for 2012.
Well, I know that obviously that's a factor. One of the things that we heard, Mr. Turner say, Congressman Turner now, as he won, was that a lot of this was he said it was a referendum on President Obama, and that Anthony Weiner didn't have a lot to do with it, and I agree with that. He said a lot of it too was the economy. You think that this was even a bigger factor than the economy?
Oh, the economy was an enormous factor. I would say the economy was the overriding factor. But the question is, in other moments of economic despair, the Jewish community in that district has still voted Democrat. So, why did the Jewish community still mostly vote Democrat in 2010? Why did the Jewish community still mostly vote Democrat in 2008? The economy was in very bad shape. For crying out loud, in 2008, that election was against the backdrop of an economic crisis. 2010 was an economic. The 2010 midterm elections were against the backdrop of a dreadful economic situation nationally. The same Republican ran in 2010. Bob Turner. He ran against Anthony Weiner, and he lost. Just last year, he lost. Turner lost against Weiner just over a year ago, and the economy was the big issue. So I'm not saying the economy wasn't a big issue this time. The question is what accounts for the dramatic uptick in vote that Turner got between last year's election and this year's election. And again, I'm not saying Israel was the only factor, and the frustrations with President Obama over Israel I'm not suggesting it's the only factor, but I am saying it was a substantial factor that wasn't a factor in previous races in that district. It was this time, and I think it's a precursor.
Definitely. Let me. The White House obviously has a spin on this because a lot of people, anytime we have one of these special elections in between elections, people try to extrapolate from that special election larger implications for the national races that'll come up in the general election. The White House is sort of saying that this was a special district. It's isolated. You can't use it to extrapolate any broader knowledge on Democrat political chances nationally. But you argue in your Wall Street Journal article that this could have serious implications in swing states with large Jewish populations. You mentioned specifically Pennsylvania and Florida. So obviously you're not buying the White House spin. You're thinking that this could be a theme of the 2012 cycle.
Of course. Look, the Jewish community in the United States is a small community. It's a community that has historically voted overwhelmingly for Democrats. But they vote in disproportionate numbers to its size. In other words, the Jewish community tends to have a very high turnout number on Election Day relative to the national turnout numbers for just regular the non-demographic, non-ethnic, religious demographic groups. Just if you look at the generic U.S. national turnout, the Jewish community tends to outperform in terms of turnout. Now, you look at where the Jewish community is concentrated in this country. There are many places that will, like California and probably statewide New York, that will go for Barack Obama because they're very blue states. But there are other states in the country that will be important battleground states, like Florida, like Pennsylvania, like Ohio. I can go on with a few others. But just take those three right there. Each one of those states has a very large, particularly around the urban areas in Florida, in the case of in and around southern Florida, in the case of Pennsylvania, in and around Philadelphia and Pittsburgh, in the case of Ohio, certainly strong Jewish community in and around Cleveland. Those communities turn out in large numbers, and those states will be battleground states for the 2012 presidential election. Those states will probably be very close between Barack Obama and whoever the Republican nominee is. And if you get a strong Jewish turnout and you have Jewish voters abandoning Barack Obama,
it could spell big trouble for the president. I hate to cut you off. We have to go to a hard break. Can I hold you over for another segment, Dan?
Sure.
Wonderful. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennen. More of this to come straight ahead. Don't go away. Welcome back. Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennen, and we're talking with Dan Signore. He's author of the book, Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle, which, to be honest with you, I've already now added to my Amazon wish list. I just got to get around to buying it, and I will be buying it soon, Mrs. Signore. Sounds like a fascinating book.
Hit the purchase button, Rob. What gives?
I got
to do? When I wrote this book, Rob, I would go around. I still do speak around the country about it, and people during the Q&A, during the question and answer period, say, "Mr. Signore," I get this all the time. "Mr. Signore, I absolutely loved your book. I'm lending it to everyone I know."
Oh.
And there's nothing more, you don't know how to respond because you're thrilled that they're so excited about the book, and a book about the Israeli economic model and what America can learn from it. It's exciting to get the message out, but you want them to hit the purchase button as an author. So come on.
I will be hitting the purchase button. I just didn't want to get my credit card out during the show. I put it there so remind me. I'll get to it. Don't worry about it.
Okay. All right. Fair enough.
Democrat National Committee Chairwoman Debbie Wasserman Schultz. She's been playing down the broader, much like the Obama administration, been playing down the broader implications of New York, arguing that the district's Orthodox and Russian Jewish population makes it more conservative than other Jewish areas. She pointed to polls showing that a majority of Jews still support Mr. Obama and that their level of approval for his performance largely tracks that of the broader electorate. Although I would think if it's tracking the broader electorate, it would be on the decline, just like it is with everybody else. But what do you make of those comments? See, I mean, they're arguing that he's still strong with the Jewish community.
Under her theory, if the New York 9 Jewish community is an aberration, is an outlier, how does that explain the fact that it's been voting Democrat for so long? In other words, if she's arguing that it's more conservative than the rest of the country, then why has this community been electing people like Anthony Weiner, Chuck Schumer, and Geraldine Ferraro to that seat? They have been. They've changed. And they've changed for a reason. The reason is, among other things, their frustration with President Obama and Israel. So I just think it's a look. The Democrats are going through contortions right now to try to explain what happened. And there's my piece in the Wall Street Journal yesterday. There's a piece in the New York Times today that talks about the concern that Democrats have. Debbie Wasserman Schultz is the chairman of the DNC. She has to carry the party line. But if you talk to, most Democrats, just off the record, they'll acknowledge that they're very concerned that, elected officials are concerned that President Obama is going to be dragging them, both in terms of Jewish turnout and Jewish fundraising. Look, there was a poll done by McLaughlin and Associates, a prominent polling firm here in New York, that showed that they polled 600 Jewish voters nationally, and among the questions they asked them is, did you vote in 2000 and did you donate to the Obama campaign in 2008? And of those that donated, they asked them, have you or do you intend to donate again in 2012? And only 64% said they have or intend to re-up. That's a dramatic decline. So you're already seeing the erosion of Jewish support. This isn't just some theory. This isn't an abstract discussion. It's not an intellectual experiment. It's actually happening. You have data that demonstrates it in terms of fundraising results, and you have data now in the form of an actual election where real human beings go to polls to express their frustration through the ballot box. So Debbie Wasserman Schultz can do all the explaining and spinning and contortions that she wants to do. All that is fine before you actually have data that underlies and backs up a theory. It's no longer just a theory.
Yeah, and just so we're clear, this is also the same woman who said that the district was a tough one for Democrats, despite them having held it for years. I mean, at one point, some of these candidates were running without any opposition. Let me ask you this: how does the president fix this? I mean, obviously, the way he's handled relations with Israel is having an impact, and people are upset about it. Can he fix this now? Before or during the 2012 cycle to bring these voters back into the fold? And I guess the second question would be, are these voters, I mean, obviously they're upset with President Obama now. They're maybe sending a message with New York 9. Does that translate into them being able to vote for instance, perhaps a Rick Perry or a Michelle Bachmann if one of those candidates should get the nomination?
Well, it's hard to know, which Republican candidate would play best with the Jewish community at this point. I think that's premature. I think your first question is the right one, which is what can the president do now? And the reality is the president can do a lot. Israel is going through a very difficult time right now with increased isolation internationally, more than it has been subjected to in any time for as long as I've been following the country, and I've been following Israel for a long time. I've written extensively about it. I wrote a book about it. I've never seen this sense of the robustness and the intensity of a campaign to delegitimize Israel and isolate Israel globally the way it is today. And the president, I believe, needs to stand up in a very firm way and express his solidarity with Israel regardless of how much heat he will take in the international arena for doing so. That's what you do. You stand by your friends. You stand by your allies, no matter how unpopular they may be. If you believe they continue to share your values and continue to be an important part of the alliance with America, and I think most Americans would believe Israel still meets those two criteria in spades. And so the president needs to make a decision whether or not he wants to stand with Israel over the next couple of years, a year and a half, both not only in terms of policy but rhetorically. Now, he has done some good things as it relates to the security relationship with Israel, and I mentioned that in the piece. Look, we're going to have the situation with this attempt by the Palestinians, the Palestinian Authority, to get a unilateral declaration of statehood recognized by the UN General Assembly in the next 10 days. Now, look, the administration is fighting that, and they're trying to discourage the Palestinians from moving forward. So that's important that they're doing that. But the question is, how did we get here? How did we get to the point that the Palestinians felt that they had enough self-confidence and momentum to push forward for a unilateral declaration of statehood, which is very dangerous and will very much set the peace process back? It's partly because the administration has taken such a one-sided view in its overall very public critique against Israel. And so there are things the president can do, but we shouldn't forget that a lot of the reason we're in this precarious state is because of the damage the administration has done.
Dan Senior, author of the book Startup Nation, the story of Israel's economic miracle, which will soon be off of my wish list into my shopping cart on Amazon.
Come on.
Shortly.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you for being on the program. We appreciate it.
All right. Happy to do it. Take care.
Mordecai sends along via Facebook, a lot of American Jews support the policies of Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel. A lot do not. I believe that a majority of American Jews have no opinion on the matter at all. When President Obama showed Prime Minister Netanyahu utter disrespect when the Prime Minister first visited the White House, folks began to think that the president was allowing his personal feelings to affect national policy. There's something going on here with Jewish voters. How's it going to play out in 2012? I guess we'll have to wait and see. I'm Rob Port, sitting in for the chairman, Scott Hennon. More coming up straight ahead. Minnesota House Speaker Kurt Zellers. Don't go away. We'll be right back.